Greetings Lunarians, old and new, I'm SorenPlays, your favorite Lunar Caster, and I welcome you back to episode 3 of Mythological Mondays. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes, I recommend you go back and start from the very beginning because I'm trying to do a chronological order to make things flow smoothly. So the first episode we went over the Divine Rune cards, their basis in mythology and what their effects are in Elestrals and how their mythological versions impact the gameplay. Last episode, we went over their divine artifacts and their sacred animals that equal each other in Elestrals. Today, what we'll be doing is going over the divine stadium runes as well as Tartarus. So let's get into it. First, we will start with Phaloi Forest, which is the stadium rune for Demeter. What Phaloi Forest does, it gives +1 and +1 defense for each earth enchanting them. Now, here's some backstory into Phaloi Forest. It's in Oak Forest in southwestern Greece. It's an actual place. It's located in Olympia, which is very fitting for a Divine Runes location. According to mythology, the mysterious beauty of the forest inspired people to believe it was the habitat of centaurs, hence Centaur. Shout out to Helen. And Dryads. They gave the forest the name Phaloi, and the chief of the centaurs the name Pholos. So I'm curious to see if that'll be a title name for one of the centaurs that will eventually come out in the future. The forest has one primary species of oak tree called the broadleaf oak. The trees are 15 to 20 meters tall and can live up to 200 years. I wonder if they're going to explain how long centaurs in the celestial world can live up to. Maybe there's some that are as old as 200 years, or are younger than that, or older than 200 years. I'm just curious to see how the lore is going to be built. The ecosystem of the forest is a food chain which consists of badgers, pine martens, foxes, eagles, turtles, weasels, owls, skylarks, jackals, magpies, vipers, rat snakes, and others. Now, some of these haven't been created as Elestrals yet. I'm curious to see if some Nexus forms in future Elestrals will come from that to help expand the roster. I think it would be cool to recognize what animals are located in these real locations and base Elestrals off of them to kind of enhance everything. The Phaloi Forest has been designated the status of a protected area, like a nature preserve would. I think that's a good thing because if you destroy forests and whatnot, it's pretty bad. Next, well, here's we see the card. What I'm going to do is show you a picture of the forest. Since it's around autumn now, I'm showing you an autumn picture of the Phaloi Forest. Look how beautiful it is. Look at how tall the trees are. They're not like thick and luscious like most forests are, but there's still a lot of trees involved. You know what I mean? Next, we're going to talk about Volcanic Forge. So for this, there is no physical location of the forges. So Hephaestus' forge was on Mount Olympus. That's where he did most of his stuff in the workshop. However, when Hephaestus was cast aside from Olympus by Zeus, he fell for a day and landed on Lemnos Island, where he was cared for and taught to be a master craftsman by the Phoenicians, which in Greek means robbers, which is very curious, which is an ancient tribe native to Lemnos. Lemnos is an actual island in the northern Aegean Sea, which I think is kind of cool. There was no actual forges or anything that was shown. I was trying to see if there was any photos of forges or any actual painted designs for Lemnos. Unfortunately, what I came up upon, this is the Fortress of Marina on Lemnos Island. Sorry, it's a stock photo. I was trying to get some better photos, but a lot of it was just pictures of the ancient theater, which really didn't show much of the island. But there's actual fortress on Lemnos. So I figured I'd show you a picture of this. Next is Atlantis. Most people have heard about Atlantis because it's a widely known location that has been used in media, such as Marvel, DC, Percy Jackson. What else? Journey to Atlantis, the old school animated movie. So I won't go into full detail about that. So Atlantis means Island of Atlas. It is originally a fictional island mentioned in Plato, who is the Greek philosopher, in case any of you don't know who Plato is. I would assume you would, but not everyone has gone to high school and had to learn about this. As part of an allegory on the hubris of nations, I'm not going to go into detail on that because that's a whole separate ballgame. So the island of Atlantis was said to be larger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor combined, which is pretty big. It was later sunk into the ocean due to an earthquake. Now I'm curious if there will be a future card that will interact with Earthquake when Atlantis is played that causes some kind of effect. I think that'd be a really cool tie-in. I don't know exactly what the effect would be off the top of my head, but I'd be interested to see. So the reason why it's called Island of Atlas was it was originally ruled by Atlas the Titan, who was punished and must carry the heavens of sky for eternity. Now when you see busts of it, it's usually like a globe that he's, or a boulder that he's carrying on his back, and that's to represent the sky or ancient or heavens. There have been dozens of locations proposed for where Atlantis actually is, but none have been found to be the true historical Atlantis. For all we know, it could be in the Atlantic Sea, it could be in the Aegean Sea, it could be in the Black Sea, it could be in the Red Sea. Who knows? So I think it'd be really cool if we eventually found Atlantis to go off of. I really love the artwork for it because you see Galaxy and some foamies. But this is the photo I chose for Atlantis. You have like a broken down stadium and ancient ruins and some dolphins and some fish. Next we have Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus is the home of Zeus and all the other gods. So Mount Olympus is an extensive mountain near the Thermaic Gulf of the Aegean Sea. Ask me what Thermaic Gulf is or where it's located. I could not tell you. It's even hard to pronounce. It's located on the border between Thessaly and Macedonia. In Greek mythology, it means home of the gods. It has been a national park since 1938, so just like the Phaloi Forest, it's naturally protected as it should be. Excuse me. So in mythology, Olympus was the name of the home of the 12 Olympian gods. One interesting fact is there are 12 Olympians, like main ones, and so far in Elestrals we've been introduced to 8. So I'm curious to see how they're going to do the final 4, if they're going to actually stick with 12 or they're just going to not focus on it. I think if they did introduce 4 to make 12, that these final 4 would be dual element divines, such as earth, fire, water, thunder, frost, wind, and solar, lunar. There's some other combinations you could choose from instead to kind of match. I was just looking at the back of an Elestral card and trying to pick where and what elements they could be. Just examples. But if they don't pick with 12, that's fine. I'm just curious of how tightly they're going to stick to lore. I know they've deviated somewhat, so in the Mount Olympus card, I'm not really going to read the effects. They're all pretty much the same. You have a Volt Tempest in there. And then here's a picture of the mountain. There's like no actual temple on this mountain range. I kind of think it's a cop-out. They should have like built a temple or something there to worship the gods. I know there's some Zeus temples in other locations. Next is Island of Aeolia, which is a floating island in case you couldn't tell by the artwork. So Aeolia is the island kingdom of Aeolus, who in mythology is the ruler of the winds, and in Elestrals he's the divine god of wind. So Aeolia is one of the locations visited by Odysseus in the Odyssey. Aeolia is described as purely mythical. It's a floating island surrounded by a wall of unbreakable bronze where the cliffs run up shears. Homer himself didn't say the location of the island, but later writers associated it with the Lipari Islands, also known as the Aeolian Islands northern of eastern Sicily, which I think is really cool that Homer kind of left it vague. I think it's a floating island. It can float anywhere. Maybe it floats around all of Greece in like a circular pattern, or it traces it. No known like exact location. And for that, here's a example of a floating island in the sky. It's not like there was an exact description of what the island looks like, so I preferred Elestral's version of it much better. Next is Mountains of Boreas. So when I was trying to see Mountains of Boreas, like some of these you can just easily Google and get Word documents and what it is and whatnot. So Boreas, there is a Boreas mountain in New York, so I'm curious if that's just more of a nod to New York than anything. So for Boreas, the myth behind Boreas is he resided in the cave of Mount Timaeus in Thrace, which I believe is what Mountains of Boreas is truly based off of. not just a reference to the Mountain Boreas in New York. So Mount Haemus, as I said in the past, was in Thrace, but it's now known as the Balkan Mountains. So you have the Balkan Mountains to the north, the Aegean Sea to the south, and the Black Sea to the east. It comprises of present-day southeastern Bulgaria, which was northern Thrace, northeastern Greece, which is western Thrace, and the European part of Turkey, which was East Thrace. It is roughly the Roman province of Thrace. So here's a cool picture of the mountains. Not Mount Boreas in New York. This is like the Thrace Mountains or Mount Haemus. This is what they look like, and it's kind of fitting that you have snow on top of it. So I'm glad it fits with the theme of it really well. Next is Temple of the Sun, which is the Apollo's stadium rune. Now I'm curious. I think it makes sense that they're not calling it Temple of Apollo, but Temple of the Sun is not like a legit actual place. It's usually more reference to Temple of the Apollo. So Temple of Apollo was located on Mount Parnassus in central Greece. There have been several temples built here throughout the history of the site. So it was originally built in the 4th century. Well, that's where the more visible ones are seen. So Apollo was not the only deity worshipped at this temple. So he was worshipped here about 9 months out of the year. In the final 3 months, people worshipped Dionysus as the god. And so they hosted stage festivals and rituals to honor him. So in my opinion, or thoughts, does that mean if Dionysus gets introduced that he's going to be a solar earth god? Because he is associated with the earth. And if he's also worshipped at the Temple of the Sun, it would make sense for him to be a solar earth. But yet again, there's a lot of other divines that can fit the earth, so I don't know if they're going to do it. It's just my thoughts. So here's a reconstructed image of what the temple kind of looked like. There's a lot of buildings and everything. There's one central temple. And in the left, you see like the theater where they hosted the rituals and whatnot and did things. I don't know what exactly. I'm not a true myth or a true historian buff. I'm more into the mythology sides of things. So next would be Temple of the Moon. That's the name I'm calling it and assuming that's what they're going to call it because Temple of the Sun for Apollo. Artemis is his twin sister. It would make sense to be Temple of the Moon. It's not an official card technically right now. We won't know what the name of the card is going to be, what its effect is going to be until Moonrise comes out, or until Dan decides to play it in a weekly casual as he tends to do to delete cards, or even if it's not Moonrise or the casual tournament, it'll pop up sometime during the 25 days of Moonrise, which I'm excited for as everyone's favorite Lunar Caster. So, as I was saying, it wasn't revealed or anything. So, Artemis's temple was located in Ephesus, which is near the modern day of Selçuk in present day Turkey. Interesting to see that a lot of these are now in like present day other countries such as Turkey and not in Greece anymore. Because you got to think back then Greece was a lot bigger and there was less countries involved. By AD 401 it had been ruined or destroyed. Supposedly it was destroyed by fire. So only the foundations and fragments of the last temple remain at the site. So beneath the later temples, there was a cult for the great goddess. So they worshipped a different aspect of Artemis, which is interesting. I think it was more like of her darker side. The literary accounts describe the cult as Amazonian, which is interesting that Amazons are kind of brought into this because most people, when they think of Amazons, they think of other locations. That's it for the Divine stadiums. I know there's a Divine stadium for the Bears, but I didn't really consider that anything, and it wasn't really associated to the Divines. So I chose not to do it. I might use that in a later video when I talk about other things. That's it for the Divine stadiums. Now we're going to talk, well, let me show you the Temple of Artemis, which is a lot bigger and nicer. So the last one I want to talk about, I know I said I wasn't going to pick stuff because, like the Bear Stadium, because it had nothing to do with Divines. But I think this is an important one we need to talk about. Tartarus. Tartarus in this game is referring to the band in Limited List. As of right now, we only have one limited card, and that is Sparkit, where he rightfully belongs, until they put out a titled version, which is more easier to handle. So with Tartarus in Mythology, Tartarus is both a divine being and a location. And I'm curious to see when they, if Elestrals decide to do divines for the Titans, if Tartarus himself is going to be a divine, and if his effect would enhance titled monster Elestrals or reduce non-titled Elestrals effect. I'm curious to see how they would handle that if they decide to go that route. So, in the Iliad, Zeus asserts that Tartarus is as far beneath Hades as heaven is above earth. So when you think of that parallel, you gotta think of where earth is and where heaven is technically supposed to be in mythology and the Bible and everything. And now compare that to Tartarus and hell. That's pretty far distance. So then when you compare heaven to Tartarus, that's astronomically completely off the wall to think about. So Cronus and many of the other Titans were banished to Tartarus after Zeus and his family defeated the Titans. What's interesting though is not all the Titans were sent to Tartarus. A lot of the female Titans were spared along with Prometheus and Epimetheus. Interesting name. I'm curious to see how that will play into the story of the Titans. Maybe the Titans that were spared are going to throw a mutiny to try to get the other Titans out of Tartarus. I don't know. These are all speculations and thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts on the matter. Please leave some comments in the description. So as you can see right here, I tried the Gates of Hell. I know it's not exactly Tartarus, but trying to find a accurate description of Tartarus without it being from a video game like Assassin's Creed or God of War just doesn't do it justice. So I went with this as like the gates, like standing in front of the gates of hell, or Tartarus, for example, because that's where they contain the prison. So I decided to use this image. Alright, well, that's it for me. That's it for this episode of Mythological Mondays. Next week, I will start delving into the cards and the Elestrals and the sets that are associated with mythology. I'm going to go in order. I'm going to start with Earth as my first one, and then just make the complete loop. If you're curious on what week I'm going to do what, so you can make sure you stay tuned and subscribe. If you just look on the back of an Elestrals card, you start with Earth and you go clockwise, and that's the order of cards I'm going to do it. Make it short, simple. I'm not going to jump around or anything. I'm going to do all the Elestrals first, and then I'm going to do any other artifacts that I may or may not have missed, and stuff like that. This is SorenPlays signing off. I appreciate all the Lunarians, old and new. Hope you learned something new. Please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. Catch you around next time. Bye!